Hi, I'm Linda Illingworth, a registered dietitian at Life Wellness Institute, and welcome to Time Restricted Eating and Intermittent Fasting. We'll jump right in. So, the origins of fasting go back to, we believe, the 5th century is what seems to be documented, and we give Hippocrates, the father of medicine, the credit for really promoting fasting as a health practice. And he's that, let food be thy medicine guy, and really recognizing that what we eat becomes part of our bodies, and we can eat something that makes us healthy, or we can eat things that don't create health and can create illness. So that's really, he's getting the credit for maybe being the first documented person to talk about fasting. But fasting has been endemic in so many indigenous cultures and in very many, tons of religious practices to prepare for prayer or services, to honor the dead. This is very common in many cultures, to place a food offering on an altar, or go through a period of fasting during mourning and to honor the dead, and also for general spiritual enlightenment in a variety of cultures as well. So, the classic vision quest to spend time alone, perhaps in nature, and either on a water fast or just very low calorie fast for personal insight and inspiration. So it's been used for thousands of years, and it has now in modern medicine has really documented the health benefits of it, and that's why it's become so popular. And really, we credit it for the main thing it's doing, and what we're doing when we're fasting is reducing inflammation, and then that can help our longevity. So those are kind of the two big global ideas behind fasting. And just one last reminder, if you don't have your mic muted, please do so, because little tiny squeaks and things pop up from time to time. So as people are joining us, I may give this a couple reminders. So when we're fasting, what we are trying to accomplish is we want to flip something called the metabolic switch. And what the metabolic switch is simply this movement from, let me get my little highlighter here, the fed state, where we use glucose as the primary fuel, and we want to switch to the fasted state. So that's all it really is. It's a fancy term, sounds like it's super duper complicated, but well, for our understanding, we just need to understand we're either in a fed state or we're in a fasted state. And once we move into the fasted state, we've activated this metabolic switch. So over here, if you look under normal fed conditions, our cells are growing, dividing, and engaging in all of the usual cellular functions. So that can be from providing energy for us to move about or exercise. That can be to make antibodies to fight diseases, to just normal cell maintenance. Cells are like a little city inside of themselves. And again, a reminder to please mute your mics. I don't think I have the ability to mute for you. So paper shuffling and things will definitely, we will hear. So inside your cell, it's like a little city, and there's multiple things going on. So there's organelles, similar to like organs in our own human bodies. And these organelles are busy folding and unfolding proteins to make different things happen within the cell, to repair the cell wall, to defend it, to create energy for the cell, to make more mitochondria, which are more engines inside the cell. Cells are super busy. And so under normal fed conditions, the cells are going through all of this. Under the fasting state, they enter a state of called autophagy. And that really translates into self-eating, but really probably self-cleaning is a better term, that where growth of the cells cease, and instead it starts to focus on housekeeping. So just like our bodies, just how, or our homes where we have to take out the trash, right? We have to take the trash out of the kitchen and out to the curb. Our cells need to do the same thing. So when they're under this metabolic growth and dividing and taking care of themselves, they have metabolic waste products. And those gather in the cell, and they need to be gathered up and turned into something that can be transported out of the cell, and then hopefully picked up by the bloodstream, and then transferred to the liver, and then they make it to the kidney, and then hopefully they make it into our urine and they exit the body. So we want to enter this autophagy phase in a reliable fashion. We don't want to go days on days where we're really not optimizing autophagy because we want the cells to be able to clean themselves up. There's something also called cell senescence, and what that means is we see old cells die off that need to be removed and be cleaned up, and that makes room for healthier cells. So this is really what we're trying to have happen in the fasted state. So the metabolic switch is moving from the fed state to the fasted state. Oh, I guess my little laser pointer is not going to let me move ahead. Okay, so another thing happens too with moving into the fasted state. So we have two sides of our nervous system. We have the sympathetic side and we have the parasympathetic side. Now, the sympathetic side is we refer to it as our fight and flight, but it really is more about, I mean, it is that, but it's also about maintaining the status quo. It prepares the body for action. It helps us do physical exercise, problem solving. This is our get it done side of the nervous system. This gets you through your workday and all the things we have to do each day. The parasympathetic side is something we don't talk about so much, but it's responsible for rest and digest, equally as important, however, not very nurtured in our Western society. You know, how many times we really talk about, you know, it's really would be really, really great. We talk about it, but how many times do we do it, right? To take a break at lunch, to really actually sit and eat so your body can digest and rest. So this parasympathetic side, one way to nurture it is via fasting. And this is where the body relaxes, our digestion and absorption is better, our sleep can be better, and this helps to reduce stress and calm the body. So one of the things the metabolic switch does in activating this parasympathetic side is that it activates or it improves heart rate variability. And so in this green box over here, what this is a tracing of a heartbeat. And often we think of our heart rate and thinking that a lower heart rate is an indicator of better health and better fitness, which is true. However, there's another aspect to our heart rates, and that's called the variability, and that's the variability between the beats. So not so much how many beats per minute, but these milliseconds. So this is 903 milliseconds between this beat and this one, and then 846 between these two, 734 between these two. So this is a measure of heart rate, the variability between the timing of the heartbeats. And the more variable your heart rate can be, that tells us you are more resilient to stressors on the body. So metabolic switch also affects this heart rate variability, which we're hearing more and more about. Heart rate variability is also improved by things like exercise. So there's multiple ways to tap into this, but you start to understand that fasting is has a very global effect on the body, and there's multiple systems that are affected. And simply by employing a daily fast system can really help you feel more calm as well. And so this is, I think, a really important piece to talk about. So the benefits of this metabolic switch are that are probably most touted are lowering blood sugar and a significant reduction in insulin levels. And this is really important for diabetes and for cardiovascular health. And the reason being is because there's less fuel to process. So if you're putting less fuel in, less glucose in, then there's less glucose and sugar in the bloodstream, and then less of an insulin response because there's less glucose around. It also lowers cholesterol, because when there's less fuel in the system, this reduces the signal to the liver to make cholesterol. So in the fed state of the cells, when they're being metabolically active, they may call to the liver or send a signal to the liver to send cholesterol as a building block, because cholesterol is used in the body for multiple building blocks. And so without that fuel around and without the cells being busy, when the cells are in the fasted, rested state, they're not sending the signal to the liver to make more cholesterol. It also improves blood pressure. And again, some of this is because there's less sodium, there's less fat to create arterial tension, but also that the cells get into this relaxed state, and that includes the smooth muscles that line our arteries and veins. And then less body fat, because when we activate the switch and we're in that fasted state, we're using more stored fat. And one of the things I like people to think about is we have two primary fuel sources. We've got glucose and fat. And if you think of the human body kind of like a hybrid car, that the glucose is like the gasoline and the fat is like the energy stored in the battery. So once we take the glucose out of the situation and we're in a fasted state, we're starting to use more of that stored fat. So by fasting, we're accessing the stored fat more easily and more readily and more frequently. And ideally, that leads to weight loss. But there's a few caveats, which we're going to talk about, and how you can kind of mess up your fast so then you don't get the weight loss that you're looking for. And then we also see an improved immune response. And that's because the immune system is most active in the rested state. And I think everyone on the planet can recognize that when you get sick or you have the flu and that you feel exhausted and tired, you aren't exhausted and tired because of what the virus is doing to you. You're exhausted and tired because the immune system is trying to put you to sleep, put you to rest, so it can go into its phase and kick up. The body is really, that's a protective cellular defense system, is to scale down metabolism, switch into rested state, starve out bacteria or viruses or anything that might use carbohydrate or glucose as a fuel. So the cells will do that naturally. So when we don't feel well, part of that feeling of exhaustion is because the body is trying to get us to rest, and that helps protect our healthy cells. One thing I want to mention in here is that some of the research on fasting has come out of cancer research. And I've given you a resource at the end. I'll point out who he is, Dr. Walter Longo, and I have some links for him, that he did a lot of the cancer research on fasting and chemo and what happens to the fasted cells and how they are protected. The healthy fasted cells are protected from chemo, more so when they're fasted than when they're in the fed state. Conversely, cancer cells are always looking for real estate, and they don't have the switch like our healthy cells have. So they will then be more affected by the chemo than the healthy cells will be. So Dr. Longo has done a lot of this research, and his site has a lot of these studies. You can, if you poke around on his site, you can read through some of this, and it's absolutely fascinating about how our healthy cells will protect themselves from all sorts of things in the fasted state. So there's multiple ways to turn on the switch, and intermittent fasting is kind of a big heading, and there's different ways to do it. So alternate day fasting is one method, time restricted feeding is another, and then there's consecutive day fasting. So we're going to look at each of those and see how would we use those and what would best suit us. Also, I get asked this so much is about should I eat before I work out? Another way to trip the metabolic switch is to what we call train low, and that means working out before you eat or having about 4 hours after a meal before you work out. And what that does is it helps you get into that, to access that stored fat fuel sooner than if you had a meal and you had all of those, all that glucose and fat and protein in your system. That's going to get used first. Whatever's most easily accessible is what the body's going to use first. So if you show up to your workout without extra glucose in the bloodstream because you're so many hours past a meal, then you're going to access that stored fat faster. So this can be a really nice tool for improving weight loss or improving lean body mass. And it is really important, though, to refuel after workouts. And that's because when we refuel after a workout, the carbohydrate we eat, some of the protein we eat gets turned to glucose, and the fats will get utilized because our metabolism stays revved up a little bit post-workout. And then the glucose gets stored in a very safe form called glycogen in our muscles. And why that's important is because that's really where the only safe place we really have to store glucose. We don't want to be storing it per se in excess anyway in the liver and in the other organs. That leads to fatty liver eventually. So getting it stored into the muscles is great. And that then helps restore the muscles, repair the muscles, improves your lean mass, helps you improve your strength, and really kind of closes the loop on the exercise of what you're trying to do in an exercise session. So anyway, turning on the switch, intermittent fasting, working out on an empty tummy, if you can do it, is really helpful. Oops. So, time restricted eating. So this is one way to intermittent fast. And this is something that really probably every human should be doing every day, is having a 12-hour fast every night. So that means having dinner, closing the kitchen, and then letting 12 hours expire before you break the fast and have breakfast or have your first meal. And research says that we can extend that to 14 or 16 hours. And there's some really good evidence that at the 16th hour, we see the most dramatic reduction in insulin. However, 16 hours is a very long time for a lot of people, and that only leaves an 8-hour eating window. And that has some issues in and of itself. If you don't need to lose weight, that can be a very short time period to get all the fuel you need. If we are looking to boost certain nutrients in your diet, again, short time window. So clinically, what I see most beneficial is that 12 to 14 hours. That's easier for most people to do. And what I have seen as far as the charts showing the benefit at the 14th hour, you hit that peak. And there's a little more benefit as you go to the 16th hour, but most people hit that 14 will get all the benefit that they need. So, so just something to think about when we're time restricted eating. So what this would look like, oops, it's doing it. Oops, hang on a second. We're going, darn. My animations got messed up here. There we go. Okay, so on a straight time restricted eating plan, if we're going to fast for 12 hours every night, we might get up and have breakfast between 7 or 9 a.m. We're going to eat our breakfast, we're going to have lunch, we're going to have dinner, and then at 6 to 7 p.m., somewhere in there, we want to begin a 12-hour fast and not eat anything else. You can have water, you can have any non-caloric beverage, if you want to have some herbal tea, something like that, and then not eating anything until 7 a.m. or 9 a.m. the next day. So 7 a.m. would be 12 hours, 9 a.m. would be that 14th hour. And you could do this every single day of the week. Absolutely no harm. If you have diabetes and you tend to run low blood sugars in the morning, I highly recommend a continuous glucose monitor, and work with your physician on this. So don't jump right into it if you know you already run low in the morning, because we want to be sure that we're timing the meals correctly. So, and not pushing it too late. So there are some caveats. Some certain health issues will take precedence over how we do this. But in general, 12 hours fast every night is a great thing to do. Just because at night then you're accessing that switch, you're reducing inflammation, you're seeing cholesterol and blood glucose coming down, and we're going to get the long-term benefits by doing that daily. Alternate day fasting looks like this. You're still going to do that 12-hour fast. So you have a normal day where you break the fast, say at 7 or 9, eat your breakfast, your lunch, your dinner, begin your fast by around 7 p.m., and then you're going to fast until the next day, till 12 or maybe even 5 p.m., depending on your fasting window. You'll have your dinner. I usually suggest people have it a little earlier than later. Some people like to eat it at 3. And if you do 3, you might have breakfast and lunch that day. I'm sorry, you might have lunch and dinner that day, not just dinner. And then you're going to start your fast again at 7 p.m. After this dinner, you're going to close the kitchen and then go back to a normal eating day the next day. Again, you would break the fast, let's say it's 7 or so, whatever 12-hour window you set up. If you're eating dinner earlier here, like at 5 though, then you might then be pushing that to that 14th hour on that following day. So this is where it gets a little individual. And again, it's more about what you're doing consistently, and not that you're getting to that, counting every minute and every second to get to that 14th hour. The 12 hours is really what's most important. And then just having a consistent feeding schedule is really, really helpful. So then the rest of your week might just look like, here's the other alternate day you're going to fast, and then the rest of the week are just normal eating days. Again, you're still going to maintain that 12-hour fast at night though. So does that make sense? And let's just review it quickly once again. So we're going to do the 12-hour fast if we're doing alternate day fasting. We're still going to do a 12-hour fast at night minimum. It might be 14 or even 16 hours. We want to be sure that we are cutting our calories by 20 to 40%, not just what we would normally eat crammed into a fasting day. So the whole point here is to take those calories out. And then fasting on alternate days. So this might be, say, Monday, we're going to have a normal eating day. We're going to stop eating at 7. Then we're going to fast until maybe noon, have lunch, have dinner, close the kitchen, have a normal eating day here on Wednesday. Thursday is another fast day. Similar to the Tuesday, we'll break our fast between 12 and 5. Maybe have dinner at 5, or maybe we're going to have a little later fast, break the fast again here at 7 on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then wash, rinse, repeat. So this is usually what I recommend as step 2. Step 1 is just the 12-hour fast at night, and then adding in these alternate fasting days if you feel like you aren't getting benefit, or if you feel like this suits you better and want to accelerate weight loss. So this is a really great way of trimming calories and without a diet per se where every meal would be necessarily lower in calories. You're really taking care of it on 2 days a week, and but that doesn't mean you can eat whatever you want on the other days, and we're going to talk more about that too. Let's see, I have one little question. Okay, am I saying only twice a week? So for starters, I usually recommend no more than 2 long fasts, if that makes sense. No, when we're doing alternate day, we might be fasting till noon. We might have our first meal at 3, or some people go as long as 5 p.m. When you start, I don't recommend doing it more than 2 days a week. What's most important, what helps people be the most consistent with any health practice is ease of execution. So if you practice with a 12 to 14-hour fast daily, and that's working well and feels easy, and then you want to add in 2 fasting days and do them alternate days, I recommend, then we're going to push that even farther. You can go 3 days a week if you want. What I don't necessarily recommend is doing an intermittent fast where you're fasting until 5 every day. I'm not a huge proponent of the 16-hour fast and the only 8-hour eating window. And the reason I'm not is because even though the research says that's where we see the most insulin reduction and we see, peak benefit, clinically, what I see come into the office and people's real life experience is different than the research study of 26 subjects, which I believe is what was in that study on seeing the reductions in insulin. So that's a pretty small study. But clinically speaking, what I see is that people will burn out. They have difficulty sticking to it. There'll be days when they want to push a workout in that day because they skipped the other day and it's too difficult to fast till 5 and get a workout in. They're not metabolically adapted to do so. It takes a while. It's just like you wouldn't go out and just run a marathon today unless you had been training to run for a marathon today. I mean, you could do it, but you're going to be probably miserable and really sore and maybe injured by the time you do it if you don't train to do it correctly. Same thing when we're talking about changing our timing of meals and something that if you want to do it purposefully and get the maximum benefit. Remember, any stressor on the body increases inflammation. So we want to be sure that we're doing this in as stress-free of a way and in a way that really presents the body with a healthy way to respond to it. Does that make sense? And we'll talk more about this when you guys can talk and ask me questions too. We can go back and look at these slides. Oh, had one. You're welcome. Okay, benefits. So with the 12-hour time restricted eating and with alternate day fasting, these are the benefits we see. Very often we see weight loss, and that's because, again, we've shortened the time of eating so we don't get into as much mischief. It's those evening hours that are the witching hour for going to get the chips or the container of nuts from Costco and sitting in front of the TV and eating those, or having that extra glass of wine, or pushing dinner till 9 o'clock at night. And Let me talk about that for a minute too. And why do we say closing the kitchen after dinner? And what is that optimum time frame to close the kitchen? And we are inextricably tied to the circadian rhythm of the sunrise, to our circadian rhythm, which is governed by sunrise to sunset. So as the daylight wanes, so does our metabolic capabilities. So the body's trying to wind down and enter that rest phase. While we have a circadian rhythm that generally is our master clock for the whole body, our organs each have their own master clock as well. So you can kind of think of it as almost time zones, right? You kind of got like New York maybe in the liver and California in the intestines. And so each of these organ systems has a different peak optimal time of operation, so to speak. So as um, the day wears on and through the evening, what we have learned is that the intestines become more open or relaxed at night, or more porous, if you will, and you will absorb more fuel at night time than you will during the day. So let's say you had a bean burrito at lunch, you will absorb less fuel out of it than you will at nighttime when the intestines are more relaxed and more permissive about how much fuel is coming into the body. So this can make a difference for weight loss. And so that's why we say trying to move those meals earlier, not eating as late, and pushing more fuel early in the day when you have the opportunity to use it while it's still in the bloodstream before it gets into storage in the body. Once it's pushed into fat storage, it's more difficult to pull back out. So we also see reduction of inflammation, lower blood sugar, cholesterol, lowering of insulin, and then because of all these beautiful things that happen, we see less pressure on our DNA, and the gene signaling gets better messaging, and so this increases longevity, or is thought to improve our longevity. So the last example of intermittent fasting is periodic fasting, and this is consecutive days of fasting. So this is generally recommended to take in chunks of 3 to 5 days. And this can be a water fast or very low calorie diet. It's also called the fasting mimicking diet. And that's because you don't have to be 0 calories to enter this metabolic switch territory. You can be very low calorie and enter into the metabolic switch category. So what this would look like is a fast, more of a traditional type fast. So you might have coffee, you might want to put some collagen protein in that. We don't want to put any glucose or creamers or anything in it that will affect our blood sugar. You might have broth throughout the day, olives, something that has some fat but very little carbohydrate. And again, nothing that's really going to affect the blood sugar and get you out of that more fat burning state. And the other two, and then day 2 and day 3 will look very similarly, but you might change things up a little bit. Like maybe there's a 100% flaxseed cracker, so that's really more fat and fiber than anything. And maybe even we can throw in about 100 calories worth of nuts and maybe a broth soup, maybe a very dilute tomato soup or something like that that just doesn't have, and I mean like a homemade thing, not a can of tomato soup that is very high in sugar. But there is a product called Prolon that has come out of the research, and I've given you the link for that as well, where you can actually purchase the Prolon program, and it has basically powdered soup mixes and these type of flax type crackers and olives and things that you would consume on those consecutive days to get through the fast, and it keeps your calorie level around the 300 calories a day range, and that's fasting mimicking range. That'll keep you from feeling starving and yet give you a little bit of fuel in the system, just enough to kind of keep you going and not have you feel lightheaded or crummy. And so that would be an extended consecutive day fasting. This I usually recommend people do first. See your physician, talk to your provider about, is this right for you? There are some definite concerns about when you would do it and how and for how long. And we really only recommend, I only really recommend water fasting under the strict supervision of your physician or your provider, or going to a facility where they supervise water fasting. And there are these places that you can go do that. And the reason being is because a lot of times you don't know how you're going to react on a pure water fast, and you don't necessarily want to be um, not people not aware of what you're doing, and then you run into trouble and pass out, and people aren't aware and can't help you. So, because it is a severe way to go through the for days on end. So, but again, this periodic fasting has been shown to be best for really bringing down um, high levels of inflammation. So, autoimmune disorders, cancer survivors often do this, or mainly for the cell senescence part, because when we get into these extended fasts, we see more of that cell autophagy and more cell senescence, so that we're turning over unhealthy cells, um, removing those unhealthy ones, and promoting more healthy cell growth. Weight loss can be very helpful for that. Again, we want to be sure that that we're supervising, especially if we have diabetes and we're looking for weight loss. We don't want to cause any metabolic problems by not putting fuel in, which can happen if you have diabetes. And what happens with these periodic fasts, we get a lot more down regulation in things like insulin-like growth factor, IGF-1, mTOR, and SK6. These are inflammatory markers that often pop up with high levels of inflammation and autoimmune disorders and things. And it upregulates things like the FOXO transcription factors, and that's for kind of rebuilding and repairing. So again, this might be best for more serious anti-inflammatory action, you could say. But again, I really recommend that you check in with a practitioner before you start this, and do it very, very cautiously and very purposefully. So, common pitfalls in fasting is because I have fasted today until 5, I can have whatever I want for dinner. So that's not really your best option. So you really shouldn't go to McDonald's because you fasted until 5. We still want to see the diet be very anti-inflammatory so it supports what you're trying to accomplish. And so often we'll see this. I've heard this again and again where I really, I haven't eaten all day, so I can have whatever. And that isn't really quite how it works to your best advantage. Fasting too long, for some people, that 16th hour is just miserable, and they're struggling through it. They don't have energy to get through their day, and that might be because the quality of the food, or the timing of when they're eating isn't quite right. So just know there's some flexibility in that. Again, starting with the 12 to 14 hours, you shouldn't feel bad doing this. You should feel good. You should feel more energized, maybe less hungry. Sleep should improve. Things should get better, not worse. So, a sign that it's not going so well, or you aren't quite executing it correctly for your body, is when you don't feel well doing this. Poor food quality. Again, that's saying you can eat whatever you want, or just not getting in the nutrients that are of concern, which we're going to talk about. Anytime you take out a meal of the day, you've taken out an opportunity to get the nutrients you need. So we want to be sure that the meals that we do eat are very on point and include all the nutrients that we need to be getting in a day. Again, lack of energy, that can be a symptom of fasting too long, or inadequate protein at meal times. Again, timing, there's things that we can talk about. And alcohol consumption. So when your caloric intake becomes restricted, which even on the 12-hour fast, it'll probably shave a couple hundred calories a day off of the mischief eating that can happen. And by closing the kitchen after dinner, that generally takes care of a couple hundred calories for people. But if we push alcohol into that system, what happens is if your alcohol intake is greater than 10% of your total calories, so I'm going to say that one more time because I know I said that quickly. If alcohol calories are more than 10% of your total calorie intake, then we see all sorts of mischief happen. That starts to press on the glucose system, the insulin system. It starts to create more fat storage, more effects on the liver. Alcohol needs to be really in relationship to the fuel consumed, and it can't take up too much of the fuel we consume without causing problems. So really trying to dial the alcohol piece back and not including it at all on fasting days would be my recommendation. So those important nutrients I was talking about. So we want to be sure that when we are eating our meals on fasting days or even non-fasting days, we're really choosing low glycemic carbohydrates because this helps keep that inflammation in check, helps keep our glucose in control, gives us really good energy throughout the day because it's burned more slowly over a period of time, and also contains B vitamins and other nutrients that we need. Healthy fat, this is the thing I see people let go of very quickly, and anytime we cut back on calories, this is easy to let go of unless you're really paying attention. So healthy fats get embedded into our cells to make healthy cells. They're anti-inflammatory and also a source of energy to some degree. So we'll talk about what those are. Fiber also, if we aren't eating, the temptation sometimes too is to go 100% grain free, or we're so worried about the carbohydrates and we're not getting those particular fibers in certain carbs like apples and berries and things like that that are good for us. So fiber helps regulate our blood pressure. It's essential for glucose and cholesterol control, and is really essential for our gut health and maintaining good levels of the microbiome, healthy bacteria of the microbiome. Folate, if you're not eating the leafy greens, then we worry about detoxification, which is an important piece. If we're talking about cell autophagy, we're really talking about helping the cells detoxify themselves too and move some of these spent nutrients and spent metabolic waste products out of the cell, and also helping our DNA replicate so that the new cells can replicate it correctly. And then antioxidants are super important. All of them, the phenols, which I can't, there are too many to list, but the other ones we think of is vitamin C, A, E, and K. They destroy free radicals. They're highly anti-inflammatory, and they, again, also the antioxidants help maintain the healthiest of our gut microbiome bacteria. So those health considerations I was talking about, reasons that you really want to check in with your health care professional is if you have diabetes or you're taking diabetes medications or other medications. You just want to be sure that there isn't anything that is reliant on food for absorption, or that you won't well tolerate on an empty stomach. If you're taking insulin, then we want to be sure that, we're timing meals around that, or metformin even. So we want to be sure that we keep you safe through the whole process. And again, you shouldn't feel bad. You shouldn't have health problems doing this. This should be enhancing your health. Pregnancy is not a great time to be fasting. Your calorie needs go up during pregnancy. And then during breastfeeding, your calorie needs go up even more. So that might not be your best time for fasting per se. You might time restrict eating, but we still want to be sure you're getting all of the nutrients and all the calories you need in order to, make enough breast milk, and then also to be able to have a successful pregnancy. So again, speaking with your physician is the best thing to do. If you have cancer or undergoing chemotherapy, while I did mention that some of this research has come out of cancer and chemo and fasted and fed states, and I still talk to your physicians about it. Is it right for you? And really understand. Don't just jump into it. Just don't try this kind of thing. Don't just randomly share it with someone you know who has cancer or going through chemo. It's a tough thing because it's not really well embraced in oncology. And so, again, it would be something you would want to discuss with an oncologist and talk with your physician. And on a very, very, very individual basis, it's still considered experimental for cancer and chemo. So, your best choices for meals when you're fasting is the same as just about any other time you're talking to me. Lean protein, you can do it all on plant-based protein as well if you want. And we want to see people moving more beans, nuts, and seeds into their diets anyway, because this is where these antioxidants and fibers are that we really need. Chicken, fish, eggs, keeping the eggs to, you know, we don't necessarily have to worry about the cholesterol from eggs. However, there is a saturated fat in eggs as well, so we want to be not just only leaning on eggs, but learning to put more nuts and seeds and other proteins in as well. Dairy, if you tolerate it, vegetables and fruits, trying to get 4 to 5 cups a day, even on a fasting day. So that might mean that if you're fasting for an extended period of time on an intermittent alternate day fasting plan, that you have a main dish salad so you can get all those vegetables in, or you're having something like a bowl that has maybe a little whole grain or beans in the bottom, and then piling on those vegetables and putting the protein on top, something like that. And those healthy fats, which are fatty fish, which is we primarily think of as salmon and tuna, sardines, anchovies, mackerel. The last three, I don't know too many people who are eating those. If you like them, I encourage you to eat them because they're mackerel, sardines, and anchovy don't have the mercury and toxin risk that the larger fish up the food chain do. And we do want to limit tuna to about once a week, one serving of it a week because of the mercury. Avocado, nuts, seeds, olive oil, avocado oil, these are all healthy fats. And really choosing just whole grains and really staying away from refined flour. That doesn't mean a couple times a week there can't be um, maybe a healthier muffin or a cookie or something there here and there. But perhaps you're not eating gluten if you find that it's an issue for you. And we're really looking at whole oats, whole quinoa, the whole rices, ancient grains like millet and farro, which is wheat, but a nice big wheat grain with lots of fiber and lots of nutrients. On this page, and I gave you a copy of this, this is just a sample meal plan. So this could go for your time restricted eating, where you're just fasting 12 hours every night, just something to follow. And this is a 17 to 1800 calorie meal guide. If you are really needing something more in the 1500 calorie range, you can take out that afternoon snack, which many fasting plans recommend no snacking. And that can actually, by not snacking, that can help you organize your meals better to be eating more at lunch and then not relying on that snack to get you to dinner. And it also might push you to eat dinner a little earlier if you don't have the afternoon snack. So just some caveats again. This the snack piece can be workable if you really need it. And for those of you who are very active and trying to fast, then the snacks might be really helpful. So again, this can be tweaked based on the individual. There's not one size fits all. So in summary, and we'll get to your questions here, time restriction, there's time restricted fasting, alternate day, and periodic fasts. Generally, we're reducing caloric intake, and that helps control inflammation, promotes cell autophagy and cell senescence, which means less disease, more longevity. Recommend that you start with a 12-hour fast daily and then add in alternate day fasting as you become an expert at the 12-hour or 12 to 14-hour. And periodic fasts are at your discretion for your personal needs. Again, we feel that they might be helpful for longevity. I encourage you to check out the resources on that and read about it so that you are better informed and can make a better decision for yourself about that. And then also have the discussions with your physicians or your caregiver before you embark on an extended periodic fast that might only be a water fast or very low calorie. Choosing high quality foods, limiting meals, and just remember that potentially limits nutrients. So fasting isn't an excuse to eat them whatever we want at that meal. Our meals still need to be pretty healthy most of the time. And then quickly through the resources, this Harvard Health blog link, and those links should be active in the handout. If it's not, I'll copy and paste this into another email and send to you. I'll double check that to make sure they are live. This blog is a great summary of intermittent fasting, gives and has fantastic research cited at the very end of it. So rather than copy all of that, because it was really great research articles, you can go right to that page and explore that. For meal planning, keeping things simple, sheet pan dinners, these are one of the easiest things where you're cooking protein and vegetables all at once on one pan, and makes cleanup and cooking easy. So there's some resource there. The Complete Guide to Fasting by Dr. Jason Fung. He's got a ton of YouTube stuff. If you go to his website, dietdoctor.com, you're going to see a lot of his videos. The only thing, and this is his book right here, the only thing I will caution you is that some of his recipes, I do have a couple bones to pick with. Some of them lean toward less healthy fats. And if you're only dealing with less healthy fats, this is where I see people get into trouble with keto type diets. So still stick to the fats that I'm recommending. Don't overdo it on things like bacon and processed meats and sausages. That isn't what's going to help you in your fasting in the long run. And the Longevity Diet by Dr. Walter Longo. It's a great place to start. And he's the one I said that had done a lot of the cancer research. Again, he's got a very deep website as well you can explore. And the Prolon, this is the link to that product I was talking about, where you just purchase the product and it just takes you through those days You certainly could reproduce that on your own, but it would take a little bit of effort. And I gave you a few hints in that in the meal suggestions on that slide, but it might just be easier to pay them for their product if that's something you want to do. All right, so now if you want to unmute yourself, I'm more than happy to take any questions you have. So whoever would like to go, just jump on in there.
Hey, Linda, this is Ed.
Hi, Ed.
Hey, how are you? Uh,
Good.
I have been doing this for off and on for a couple of years since I went in and had a physical and saw the book on, on the table there, and in between uh, different exams, I've read through some of it, and I really like it. And I've been doing the 8 hour window, eating window, quite a bit.
Good.
And my question is, I guess from my own research, I kind of gathered that eating your carbohydrates during the day and then finishing up with protein was the best combination. Is that correct or
Yes,
not?
so I would put the if you're going to have, let's say, a slice of sourdough bread, which is the lowest glycemic bread, by the way. A lot of people are surprised by that. It's lower than whole wheat bread. So if you're going to have, let's say, a piece of sourdough bread, maybe have that at breakfast or lunch, and don't put the more processed carbs at dinner. At dinner, I would be opting for things like the root vegetables, like sweet potatoes and beets, and maybe putting things in like winter squashes or acorn squash that feel more like a potato or feel starchy but really don't contribute any glycemic bumps the way pasta or white rice could do, um, and focusing more on uh, roots and shoots, as we call it,
Yeah.
and less on the grains at nighttime can really be helpful for a lot of people. Now, some people find if they do that, then they don't have as much energy if they work out first thing. But again, some of this is a little bit about finding out what your body likes and what you prefer. So some people need a little bit more. I find that if I don't have a little bit of carbohydrate, and it doesn't have to be a lot, but it could be some quinoa or some sweet potato at dinner at night, then if my workouts are a little more challenging sometimes in the morning. And it's a subtle thing. It's not a break the deal kind of thing, but for some people might find that they do better that way. But again, if you're feeling well on it and doing well, then that's a really good marker that you got it right. I'm glad that
All
the
right.
8 hour window is working for you.
All right. I feel good. All my blood work and all that stuff is great. I'm not losing a lot of weight, but I think I'm going to try the dropping it down every third day and eating less calories. I'm eating around 2,000. And so I think I need to probably drop the calories, eating the right stuff, but too much.
Right. And so you can try that. The other thing too is to really get our heart rates right. So if you're a life wellness patient, you've probably heard me say talking to Rory, our exercise physiologist, is important because getting that heart rate right when you're working out means that you stay in the fat burning zone. And at heart rate in the fat burning zone is generally lower than most of us think it is. And sometimes you feel like you're crawling through the workout, and so you might have to go a little longer in the workout, but at a lower heart rate to get to that weight loss piece. So sometimes it is about the food, and it might be in your case, Ed, and then sometimes it's about fine tuning our exercise piece. So
All right.
good
All
observation
right.
on your point, though. Yeah, thanks for sharing. That's
Thank,
awesome.
yeah, thank you.
Anybody else have a question?
Hey, Linda, it's Zank. Thanks for doing all this
Hey,
and putting the
thanks.
slides together. I know how much work this takes, and we all appreciate it so much. So thanks for
Aw,
doing that.
my pleasure. Happy to do it.
Yeah, you know exactly what I'm going to ask you, Linda. If I'm going to fast for 3 days in a row, which I really like, actually, there's something that's beautiful about not being hungry the third day when the first 2 days were I was so hungry, and there's something I like about that that's so telling. For me, and I turn 50 in another week. Do you recommend I do this every quarter? And that's the Zank question.
Great question, because that's what you're going to see when you read about it. Especially Dr. Longo suggests, and happy birthday early, by the way. That's a big one. That's a good one. Yay. Happy for you. So when we're talking about these consecutive day fasts, it has been it's been suggested that doing it quarterly might be very helpful. And, or twice a year. We don't have a lot of data to base, say it's so much better at this time frame or that time frame. But some people are even doing it monthly. And, when we look back at various cultures and different practices that over the, thousands of years that humans have been fasting, we see all sorts of variations of it. So, probably what I always feel like is probably, I would think around quarterly.
Okay.
And I don't have a lot of, like I said, rock solid scientific evidence to make that statement. But just from being a dietitian forever, now it seems like for 30 plus years, you need to do something consistently enough to get some effect. So I would think if you did it once or twice a year, it might not be enough. The cell senescence piece might not be enough to hang on. But we know that cells tend to turn over in this 30 to 90-day sequence, and that so doing something every 90 days, like a 3 day fast, or even a 5, if you're capable of it, might be where that benefit is most accessible for most people. Does that make sense? A monthly 3 day fast might be just way too much. And again, there's something about humans that if we can't do it and do it the way we're supposed to do it, then we abandon it entirely. So finding that sweet spot where it fits well into your lifestyle is important too. And then also being sure that we're doing it safely and getting the health benefit. Good
Okay. Yeah.
question.
On the lifestyle side, Linda, very really quick question. I could fast Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. I a little dizzy at work, maybe on the fasting days, but not too bad. But my work is fairly casual. So if that's a Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, do you have any preference over that for someone versus a Friday, Saturday, Sunday fast where, maybe I'm out on Saturday trying to get something done and I'm a little weak because I'm fasting. So I've always done it Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, but do you even care? Or am I making this up? Is this all in my brain or any
No, I
preference?
think that's really, really a good point because we tend to say, oh, well, we're, a little lightheaded. Well, that could be, we want to be sure that it's, it could be multiple things coming into play. It's most likely that you're low in glucose, low in fuel, but we also, we need to do this safely. So we don't want you out doing any heavy exercise, on those fasting days. And it might be a sign that you need a little bit of something in the system.
Yeah.
So that maybe 100%, if it's 100% water fast you're doing on those days, then maybe we want to throw in a flax cracker, or we want to throw in a couple of olives or a little bit of fuel to so that you aren't hypoglycemic.
Yep.
So
Perfect.
I would
Thanks.
just play with that a little bit and see, because we don't want you to be feeling dizzy all day kind of thing, and not, that isn't really where we want you to quite be.
Yep. Yep.
That might be too much. But yeah, I wouldn't do it on the weekends personally. If you're more routine and your activity's lower during the week, I think that's a better time to do the fasting.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. Thanks again, Linda.
Yeah, of course. And happy birthday.
Cheers.
Anybody else?
Linda, I just have a question a little bit about you. You say you've been a dietitian for 30 years. It looked like it came up as a UCSD Zoom
Yes.
link. And also you're with Live Wellness University. Is that affiliated with Lee Rice?
Yes.
Okay. And then have you worked with Rob Knight at the Center for Microbiome Innovation at UCSD? Because the microbiome is coming up to be a really interesting area of study where the mind-gut connection and all of those things.
Absolutely. So the first question is, we're not at UCSD, but we have the benefit of our affiliation with UCSD from working with, so San Diego Sports Medicine is our parent company, and they have a long-standing relationship with UCSD for different things. And so we get to use that link, that Zoom link, based on our relationship with them, which allows me to have longer time on Zoom than my
Yeah.
free Zoom account. And yes, I do work with Lee. And interesting you should mention the microbiome, because the next set of classes I'm going to be holding a series on the microbiome for that very reason, so that we understand what a healthy microbiome is and what things affect the microbiome and how we can foster certain healthy populations simply by including some delicious foods that we might otherwise not eat, because we don't know that they're that important. So that'll be coming up.
One of the things that Rob Knight really got me convinced about is to avoid antibiotics unless you absolutely need them, because it can mess up your microbiome for as much as a year.
That and it can mess up all of our immune systems by creating drug resistant bacteria and viruses,
Yeah.
and so that is, yeah, definitely.
Oh,
Sometimes it's, I know we want to get that antibiotic because we know how much better it makes us feel, but sometimes we just need to tough it out.
yeah, exactly. And then one last thing I would say is my friend Larry Smar, who used to run a major center at UCSD, is now a emeritus professor, has done the time restricted eating for years. And he has a quote he made one time that said, um, medicine is not science, but science can inform medicine. And he's a big data guy. So, he measures everything. And I think it's an absolutely fascinating journey he's on.
Yeah, it's so true. I love that quote because what we see in research doesn't always play out in real life and clinical practice to the same degree. And
Mhm.
so clinical practice is, we absolutely can be informed by the science, and then we have to see how it works in real life. And one of the reasons I like epidemiological studies because it tells us more about, you get all the other factors of humanness in there as well. And
Mhm.
it might muddy the waters a little bit, but we humans are full of activities and behaviors that are hard to track. So,
Well, Larry self-diagnosed with Crohn's disease based on data. I told him I thought he was the only person who went to see his doctor with a PowerPoint presentation.
I love it. Anyone else have any questions on fasting or the resources or anything?
Linda,
Yes.
Becky here.
Hi,
I
Becky.
wanted to ask you about exercise and fasting.
Yes.
We're going to go out and play a couple hours or do something for a couple hours of pretty strenuous exercise. Do we just want to see how our body responds coming maybe from an empty place as opposed to having something to eat and then exercising? You'd mentioned that 4 hour window.
Right. So when you're going to go out and do something for an extended period of time, we can kind of then look to sports nutrition. Like what do athletes do in that situation? So if they're playing football for 3.5 hours or something, they're going to exhaust their fuel stores. So then they might need to refuel. So an experiment you could try is to go, if you're going to play tennis first thing in the morning, get out there, play half an hour, 45 minutes and see how you feel. If you're feeling really good and your game's good, then you're doing okay. But I would take a snack, take some apple slices or some orange slices with you. If you feel a little weak or lightheaded or it doesn't feel good, on a break, you might just want to take a couple bites of something and then see how your performance is.
Trying to remember how many calories of glycogen our bodies store, and I would need to look it up. But I mean, for the most part, I think most of us, unless we're going out and, doing a half marathon or something, even a 10K, we should have enough in there to hold.
Absolutely. If you're eating well, you should have enough. If you're refueling after workouts, you
Mhm.
should have enough glycogen to get you through 45 minutes easily. And then at that point, then the body has other resources. It can start to pull out of stored fat, which it's also doing simultaneously, but it'll pull more out of stored fat and it'll even mobilize some proteins for glucose fuel. So you should be okay. But again, I want to err on the side of safety and always listen to your body. I know there's a lot of people that say they don't feel well unless they eat a little something, and but that may be fine for those people, but especially on those workout days to do so. So on a fasting day, maybe they don't want to do that. But I would say most of us can get up and put in a 30 to 60-minute workout fasted and be okay. This is something that's kind of interesting that I don't see addressed a lot with youth sports. So if there's any parents on the team, I have seen roller and ice hockey players kind of go through these periods and they have very intense skating. So by the third period, a lot of them are what we call gassed. They're just out of fuel and they've got water on the bench. But if they put like half a bottle of Gatorade split with water in that third period, then that'll instantly go into the bloodstream and give them the fuel they need to get through. So especially for youth, I think it's super important because those kids are still growing as they're also athletes. And so they have this double kind of stepping on the gas pedal with 2 feet on their energy needs. So getting them through their sport successfully can really be help them get ahead of that refueling process and also help maintain their growth and development through these, um, sometimes very intense sporting events. So,
Mhm.
well, any other questions before we wrap up? Got
Oh,
everyone?
terrific.
Did I hear one more?
No, I just said it was terrific.
Oh, okay, great. Well, I'm so glad. I hope, I know this is a ginormous topic, and I know I probably just grazed the surface, but again, I'll send out the recording, and that probably won't come out until Monday. Takes a little bit to process it. And in the meantime, you've got the outline and a few of the key slides I've sent to you, and hopefully you'll explore some of the resources and have a great weekend.
You too, Linda. Thank you.
You're the
Thanks,
best,
my
Linda.
pleasure.
Thanks.
Thanks so much for joining me, guys.
Bye.